nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing. You want to hear Toot Toot Tootsie? All right, hold on, hold on. Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. Toot Toot Tootsie, don't cry. I'm gonna buy.
It was like you were walking into another world.
Another world above the clouds in this epic of the war in the air. Ben-Hur was an MGM epic. Some silent films were even in Technicolor. Douglas Fairbanks was among the first to use it. The idea for a film about pirates was suggested to Fairbanks by Jackie Coogan, who watched the filming of the underwater scenes.
It was not done underwater at all. It was done on stage with blue backing. And the men were in mechanics, suspended, but they did the swimming movements like this, you know, and they were moved across this stage.
The silent film, pictures and music soon became a universal language, a language understood all over the world.
In darkest Africa and middle of India and all through China, way out of the way places where nothing had ever happened. Maybe places they'd never even seen a motor car, never heard of an airplane. They would still see a movie.
Nothing in this new language had more universal appeal than comedy. Laurel and Hardy had been in pictures separately for years when they were brought together in 1926 by producer Hal Roach.
Laurel and Hardy were to sell Christmas trees in the summertime, and they needed a bungalow which they were going to practically wreck.
Noah's Ark, one of the last silent films, had dialogue scenes added, but it still displayed all the spectacle which audiences of the silent era had come to expect from Hollywood. And in the silent era, Hollywood was a magnet for foreign directors, like Michael Curtiz.
He was an acrobat of some kind in one of those obscure Magyar countries between Czechoslovakia and Yugoslovakia. I thought it always said they shook him out of a tree and put shoes on him and brought him to America. But he did have the greatest power of visualizing. I visualize. Booney, come here, I visualize the scene, you know. And he would give you the damnedest lineup you ever heard of. Curtiz was a very excitable guy and pretty sadistic. Would go out of control a great deal. I remember a scene that I walked over to the Vitagraph lot where they were making it, and they let go with about 50 dump tanks and a big reservoir with extras in the path of this flood. Not stunt people, you know. And they came tumbling down topsy-turvy, with Curtiz screaming at them from the sidelines and throwing 2x4s into the flood because they started to stand up in panic.
The star of the film was Dolores Costello.
It was brutal. I called it mud, blood, and flood. There was much blood. Mr. Curtiz had been told which were the breakaways, which were the permanent parts of the set. And they had long-horned steer in there, and human beings, and some dummies. But he put the human beings where the real set was, and the dummies where the breakaway was, because he wanted realism, as he called it. There were people injured. I found a man leaning against my dressing room door, which was really an office. And he was heavily bandaged. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, 38 ambulances have left. I'm in better condition than most of them, and they're coming back for me. And he said, "I think somebody's been killed."
The men who ran the arcades quickly realized what brought the customers in. Sex. The birth of a pearl. And violence. The execution of a spy. The Great Train Robbery took American movies out of the slot machine era. Instead of 30 seconds, it lasted 12 minutes, nearly a whole reel. It told the story in detail of the robbery of a passenger train. Some prints were carefully hand-tinted. To play a train robber, director Edwin S. Porter hired G.M. Anderson, later to become famous as the cowboy Bronco Billy.
I played about 4 or 5 parts in that. I was a fellow that run away from the passenger train after the robbers got them all lined up and got killed. And then I was a tenderfoot in the room where they were having a dance, and all the roughnecks made me dance.
Anderson was in the audience at Hammerstein's Theatre on a night in December 1903.
They were all seated there, and they came out and made an announcement. They're going to see something wonderful, a great train robbery. And the audience didn't seem to take to the idea very much, and then started. Then as it started, they all started to get boisterous and yell and shouted, "Catch 'em, catch 'em!" And after the picture was over, they all stood up and cheered and shouted, "Run it again, run it again!" And after it was over, they all, in one acclaim, gave it a rousing, rousing reception.
This, from Pathé Frère of Paris, was typical of hundreds which showed the technical superiority of European films. Griffith and his cameraman, Billy Bitzer, transform a close-up into an expression of menace in this gangster film. By aiming a gun directly at the audience, he makes them share the terror of Dorothy and Lillian Gish, two young actresses discovered for Biograph by Griffith. Lois Weber directed and played the lead in this one reel melodrama. Alone in the house, she is threatened by an intruder. As well as intercutting, like Griffith, Weber showed 3 incidents happening at the same time with a split screen.
I sat at the end of a row with men, and during parts of that, the whole row shook with their sobs. It was so moving.
Griffith touched the audience's heart because the story was so close to his own. The South was defeated just a decade before he was born.
Oh, I suppose it began when I was a child. I used to get under the table and listen to my father and his friends talk about the battles they'd been through and their struggles. And those things impress you deeply. And I suppose that got into the birth. Oh, that's natural enough, you know, when you've heard your father tell about fighting day after day, night after night, and having nothing to eat but parched corn. The people were fighting desperately against great odds, great sacrifices, suffering, death. It was a great struggle, a great story.